Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. Happy Friday, it's April 10th. I'm Sarith Hawk. Years ago, a Kern County oil operator faced fines after regulators found dozens of violations.
Ranging from failure to dispose and report oil waste in a proper manner, to failure to prevent oil leaks, to failure to erect fences around oil sumps.
Now the owner of that oil company is in the hot seat again, this time facing criminal charges. We'll learn more about what this case means in light of new oil production in the region in just a few minutes. But first, these headlines. A former employee of the Fresno Arts Council has confessed to embezzling $1.5 million from the nonprofit organization. This comes the same day the U.S. Attorney's Office in Fresno charged Suliana Caldwell with felony wire fraud. In a plea agreement filed in federal court on Wednesday, prosecutors say Caldwell admitted to the embezzlement and said she began transferring the money into her bank account in June 2022. She faces up to 20 years in prison. The Fresno Bee reports Caldwell is scheduled to enter a guilty plea on April 20th. The Tulare County Sheriff's Department is mourning the death of a detective killed on duty yesterday. He was with a group of officers serving an eviction notice in Porterville when he was shot. Tulare County Sheriff Mike Boudreau reports that the deputy died just before noon at Sierra View Medical Center. His wife is 4 months pregnant.
This situation went from a civil order of removal to where our officer was shot and killed. This is senseless.
The shooting forced several neighborhoods and schools to be placed on lockdown. Residents were told to shelter in place for their safety. Fresno's mayor communicated with school district leaders about a major housing development planned for the southeast part of the city. That's according to new reporting by our news partner Fresnoland. They revealed text messages sent by Mayor Jerry Dyer to members of the Fresno Unified School Board of Trustees. The texts discuss a 9,000-acre housing development that has come up against opposition from community and school leaders who say it threatens Fresno neighborhoods. Dyer appears to ask trustees not to take a position on the project. The city was supposed to vote on the development late last year, but decided to hold off and continue reviewing the project after pushback. Cahuilla Health could be getting its first union. A majority of resident physicians who work at the hospital in Visalia filed a petition yesterday to be recognized as a union. A statement from the Committee of Interns and Residents Union said the resident physicians at Cahuilla Health face long work hours and dwindling resources. The hospital employs nearly 150 resident physicians. Survivors of the 2018 Camp Fire rallied at the state capitol this week in support of a bill that would push utilities to fully compensate wildfire victims. The fire killed 85 people. The legislation would require the California Public Utilities Commission to assess how much victims of pre-2019 wildfires are still owed and recommend ways for utilities to pay them without passing costs to ratepayers. Paradise Mayor Steve Crowder lost his home in the fire. He says victims have only received about 70% of what they were promised.
Predator attorneys that were involved that took 30% of whatever you got. That leaves us with 40%. We had a lot of people that were underinsured and no insurance, and with 40%, there's no way that they can come home.
The bill would also direct the CPUC to find ways to cut electricity rates by 30% by 2028. It's currently making its way through the Assembly. California Attorney General Rob Bonta has announced a criminal operation involving hospice care that defrauded Medi-Cal of $267 million. Bonta says the suspects used fake identities to sign up for Medi-Cal services. The AG says the suspects also bought hospice care facilities and billed Medi-Cal for care under fake identities. Assemblywoman Alexandra Macedo of Tulare County, who urged for the hospice fraud crackdown, called today's raid a hard-won victory for the taxpayers of California.
Central Valley Daily listeners care about what's going on in their community. On Sunday, May 3rd, KVPR is hosting Corks and Brews, our annual spring fundraiser. We're looking for a few more volunteers to help make our event better than ever. Apply to volunteer yourself or bring your team to help out with our biggest fundraising event of the year. Volunteer slots are available before, during, and after the event. It's a great way to give back to your community and support your favorite daily podcast. Request to become a volunteer by emailing events with an S at kvpr.org.
And now to our main story. California has an expensive problem on its hands. Across the state, abandoned oil wells pose an environmental hazard and present a challenge for operators who are tasked with cleaning them up, not to mention the communities left dealing with toxic materials near their homes. But many operators don't address the wells. In those cases, the state has to come in and either force operators to pay fees or submit plans to get the wells cleaned up. One estimate from the Center for Biological Diversity says that a little over 1,000 oil well operators have not done either of those things. Cleaning up just one well can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars alone. Today, we're looking at the problem of abandoned oil wells by looking at one company in particular. State regulators have alleged numerous violations by 25 Hill Properties in Kern County. The state has tried to force the company to clean up its oil fields in recent years, and its owner is now also facing legal troubles of his own. Marek Warszawski is a freelance journalist. He recently reported on 25 Hill Properties for KVPR. He joins me now to dive into his reporting. Thanks for joining me, Marek.
Hi, Saritha. Glad to be here.
So first, Marek, the owner of this Kern County oil company, 25 Hill Properties, is currently facing criminal charges. I thought we could start by explaining the legal case involving Ronald Engelberg, the owner. We understand he has pleaded not guilty and was released on bond, but who is Engelberg and what violations are prosecutors alleging he committed?
Well, Saritha, Ronald Engelberg is the owner and operator of 25 Hill Properties, a Kern County oil producer that holds multiple leases near Taft. In February, the Kern County District Attorney's Office, along with multiple state agencies, charged Engelberg with 5 criminal and civil felonies. The most serious of these felonies, reckless disposal of hazardous waste in a manner that risks human life or safety, carries a maximum sentence of 9 years under a recently strengthened state law.
And on a basic level, can you explain why it matters that this oil and sludge is out in the open? We actually saw a picture on our website that accompanies your story. And it really illustrates what we're talking about. It shows fluids and sludge that are shown leaking from an out-of-service oil tank. So what kind of impact does it have on the environment?
Well, I mean, there are environmental risks having uncovered oil wells and oil sumps, leaky out-of-production oil wells. Are risks to humans or wildlife that are near them. And in the CalGEM report that I alluded to in my story, they have multiple photos of dead birds or rodents, floating in uncovered oil wells. And from what I gather, some of these oil facilities are located, within 300 feet of a residence and 800 feet of an elementary school. So very close to the communities.
Right. Yeah. So it was the Kern County District Attorney who brought these charges against him. And where does his case stand right now?
Yes, it was the Kern County District Attorney, but curiously, it's the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is listed as the prosecuting agency because one of the charges is illegal disposal of hazardous waste into state waterways. But when I questioned people about that, they said, well, it's all of us, meaning the state agencies and the DA's office, are charging Engelberg. And as you said, he pleaded not guilty to the 5 felonies in February. He was released on bail, and the next hearing is scheduled for May in this case.
And the California agency that regulates the state energy industry is known as Geologic Energy Management Division, or CalGEM. You report that CalGEM is actually familiar with Engelberg and his company 25 Hill Properties. Can you break down the previous legal case brought against this company?
Yeah, sure I can. In 2022, CalGEM and Engelberg, 25 Hill Properties, agreed to what's known as a final judgment and permanent injunction involving more than 100 environmental violations, ranging from failure to dispose and report oil waste in a proper manner, to failure to prevent oil leaks, to failure to erect fences around oil sumps. As part of the settlement in that 2022 case, the court designated CalGEM to oversee compliance with the ordered remedies for a period of 5 years. The company was also fined $100,000.
And you learned that the company actually filed for bankruptcy last summer. How does that complicate the cleanup?
Indeed. According to the court records I found, 25 Hill Properties filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy last June and is reported as being permanently closed. The company also had 7 wells that were in production until last year, according to what I found online. 25 Hill Properties claims it has no assets to liquidate and pay its bills for these fines and environmental repairs, meaning taxpayers will likely get stuck with the cost.
And you spoke with environmental groups who say that this case involving one Kern County company is really representative of other issues they've seen. What were their concerns, and what kind of challenge do abandoned oil wells present in communities?
Well, I mean, they are environmental hazards, first of all. So that's the first challenge that they environmental activists, they're pretty adamant that 25 Hill Properties is far from the only oil producer that commits these type of violations, even though this case feels particularly egregious. And again, I couldn't really find other instances where an oil producer is charged with 5 felonies. I mean, there have been some other companies that have paid fines and maybe settled cases, but this seems particularly harsh. So, I mean, the acts that he is alleged to have committed seem pretty egregious. Among the biggest concerns expressed by environmentalists, however, is the fact that CalGEM allowed this firm to go unpunished for years despite the court-ordered remedies. So what happens now that oil production in Kern County is ramping up again after a recent moratorium? How many other incidents and violations will continue unobserved and unpunished like this one, now that there's even more potential oil wells to be monitored by CalGEM?
The Center for Biological Diversity does say that this year had more drilling permits in the first couple months since Senate Bill 237 went into effect than the previous 3-year period. So looks like we're in for a lot more issues potentially.
Well, a lot more potential issues. Center for Biological Diversity reported that in the first 2 months of this year, 128 new drilling permits were issued by state regulators. In the 3 years that preceded 2026, the total was 121. So again, it's a problem of if we can't regulate the oil permits that we have already, how are CalGEM and other inspectors going to do that when there's even more permits that are issued for new well drilling?
Marek Warszawski, KVPR contributor, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Sarith.
And that is today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden, Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado, Elizabeth Arkalian, and KVPR, with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Sarith Hawk. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Every day on Up First, NPR's Golden Globe-nominated morning news podcast, we bring you 3 essential stories. At the heart of each story are questions. What really happened? What really mattered? What happens next? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious and to follow the facts. Follow Up First wherever you get your podcasts and start your day knowing what matters and why.